Welcome, Greg. Thank you for hosting me here at Bluelab today. And thank you for your time. As I was saying a few minutes ago, it's a brilliant looking office here. So maybe you could just tell people on the podcast, what Bluelab does, how long it's been around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Bluelab is predominantly focused on measurement, monitoring and controlling certain key parameters in controlled environment growing. So they are parameters such as pH, conductivity and temperature. These parameters are really significant within the controlled environment space because they help the grower to maximise their yield and quality.
So how did you get into that? I mean, that's a very precise scientific description of horticulture's key challenges, but how did you get into it?
Okay, so it really stems from when I purchased a business back in 2000. We were a fairly wide and diverse company that were involved in everything from turnkey hydroponic systems in the Pacific Islands to irrigation fittings and nutrient manufacture, the whole lot. So over time what happened is we really just decided to focus down on the things that we thought we could be really good at, and also the things that we thought we could really scale in a global way.
Right, okay, interesting. So it's always been involved with horticulture.
Yes.
But more initially as a broad distribution of different products.
Yes, it was. And I think that electronics were just a very small part of that business. So
right.
Literally it had an electronics portfolio of like one product, and then we just kind of built off that.
Okay, so you did have sort of a core piece of IP that you then
Correct.
kind of built from.
Yep.
Okay, and that was almost over 20 years ago.
Yes,
now.
that was in 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we rebranded to Bluelab in 2004, and then we really started to strip away the other components to just focus on the measurement and control.
And what was your strategic thinking to make that choice? Because that's pretty important.
Okay, I think there were two things.
Yeah.
So the two things, I think, one is that we these products were things that the growers needed on a regular basis. So that was one thing. When you compare the cycle times with some of the other product lines that we were in, were very long, particularly quotation and then tendering and the whole lot. And the other one is really just the fact that globally these products obviously were in high demand, and so we felt that we could really do something in the US market and Europe, which
right.
we couldn't really do with the other product lines.
So was that around the time that you did the Global 321?
Yes, I think it was. So we rebranded to Bluelab in 2004, and then I did the Go Global, I think, in 2005. So,
right, okay.
So I think the work that we did, or I did in the strategic part of the Go Global, really helped sort of hone down on some of the things that I needed to focus on, and also some of the things I probably needed to stop doing.
Right, interesting. Now, for those people, because I only learned quite recently what that program was. I know that Liz Wotherspoon, who's chief executive of the growth business at the Icehouse, was heavily involved in that, and I think it was a program that was sponsored by NZTE to help companies expand internationally, but executed by a partnership between the Icehouse and I believe a US university. I think it was Thunderbird over in the States. Okay, so yeah, really help. The purpose of that, I believe, was to help companies think more globally.
Correct, absolutely.
Yeah. And you've obviously kind of connected the dots between seeing that opportunity, doing the program, and then executing it. Were there any other key benefits that you got from that program?
Well, I think it was several blocks of residential, and I think the sort of culminating part was the business plan, and then the business plan was then you had to present, and then you were kind of critiqued on it by some expertise that they had in the room, and I thought that was actually really kind of the valuable piece. Is what people came out of it with was a plan that they could really use to go forward with.
So tell me the journey from then. So about 2004, 2005, so it's 15 years ago, decided to focus on the electronic components.
Yes.
So divest from some of the other pieces. What's been the journey since then?
Well, I think there's been a couple of key milestones in the journey. So if we fast forward from 2005 to 2009, we really started to implement a lean manufacturing philosophy, which really cut through a lot of the waste that was in the business, so that really helped us. But then in 2010, we employed our first US employee on the ground, and I think that made a big difference, because suddenly, instead of us visiting the market on a sort of quarterly basis, we had someone in the market all the time. So that really accelerated our opportunity to get in front of key customers and distributors in a way that we couldn't by sort of visiting in and out. So that took a while for us to get to that position. We had a few other goes at that, but we managed to get to that. And then a year after that, we employed our second person in the US. So from there, we just have gradually grown that business. So initially, when it was just a sort of a sales operation, it's now moved into more of a full customer service and marketing business as well. So we've really moved it now so that our customers are actually buying from our US company rather than New Zealand company, and the New Zealand company supplying the US company with product.
I know from my experience that Americans particularly, well in fact any country, like to think they're buying from a local provider. Do you represent yourself in the United States as a US entity?
I think we still very much play on our New Zealand background, and I think our customers really appreciate that, but they know they're dealing with US people in the US time zone. So I think we've really been able to get the best of both worlds from that, both in terms of the ability to our customers to deal locally, but still with the referencing point around the fact that the product is coming from New Zealand is actually a really valuable marketing aspect for our business.
And is that because New Zealand's brand is connected to the market space you're interested in terms of healthy growing, and or what do you think the connection?
Well, I think there's several connections. That's certainly one of them. Before COVID, New Zealand was the place that every second US person seemed to want to visit. So there was also that strong connection there. So there was a lot of goodwill in the US towards New Zealand, and I think that was definitely seen as a real opportunity, and obviously they liked dealing with us as people as well, because we had sort of high ideas around what we needed to be doing with regards to the way we transact business. So we're not sort of people who do things or say we're going to do one thing and then do something else.
So high integrity, high trust.
Yeah.
I could echo that from my experience there. So how many folk have you got now in the States?
So we have around 15 people in the US, and they're spread geographically across the US in sales functions and customer service functions and marketing functions.
And here in New Zealand?
Here in New Zealand, I think we have about 115 people.
Okay. And one of the questions that now I'm assuming most of your manufacture, all of it's done here in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Have you, many companies as they go global, they consider they consider, depending on volumes, etc., foreign or offshore manufacturing and keeping the intellectual property here. Is that a choice or a decision that you've made proactively, and what's your thinking in that area?
I think COVID last year has really forced us to relook at supply chain and supply chain resilience. I think we all feel that there is a huge change in the way that the world does interact with its supply chains now, and I do feel that having the ability to manufacture in different places across the globe is certainly something that we need to be considering for the future.
Okay, so it was kind of off the table or a sort of back burner, and then COVID's brought it to the front, thinking actually we need sort of more multi-point manufacturing.
Yes, I think so, and also just the fact that supply chains are complex, and I think one of the desires we have is to simplify the supply chain and try to reduce the length of that supply chain into market, just from a lot of reasons that just make a lot of sense in terms of improving that simplicity.
So if I could just ask a couple of questions around the products you make. How many of the components are kind of core manufactured offshore, sort of chips plastic components, etc. You say a percentage-wise?
Most of them actually, probably well over half, maybe 70% actually come from New Zealand suppliers.
Okay.
But those New Zealand suppliers obviously then have to source offshore for some of their parts.
Okay. But that's still a positive view. And
so our plastic supplier and our PCBA or our circuit board supplier are both based in New Zealand here, and they are the vast majority of the cost of componentry that comes into this site.
Okay, well that's great news. Good news story for New Zealand. Now, one of the things that this podcast will be listened to by other alumni, other people who've been connected into the Icehouse or are considering connecting in. Just looking at Bluelab and the story that you've told, and the fact that you were finalists this year in the High Tech Supreme Award, it's a great New Zealand success story. What lessons or thoughts or advice would you give other small medium business owners as they consider growing their businesses? What are some of the lessons you could offer them?
I think the things that have been really significant to us has first of all been focus in terms of understanding the market that you want to be involved in and the geography that you want to be involved in, because often as a small business you can't be everywhere at once. So in some areas we made deliberate decisions to speed up in one market and not put as much emphasis on another until we had that other market up and running. And I think the other one is just understanding the market that you're actually in and understanding, is that market big enough to be able to grow your business into that market. I think so. You really understand that whole feasibility, desirability and viability aspect.
Interesting. Yeah, well, thank you, Greg. I mean, that's been a really fascinating story, and I wish Bluelab all the best in the future. I look forward to walking around your factory just after this podcast, so thanks.
Thanks, Gavin.